the women's side of the sport is really growing. It's snowballing, it's getting the exponential growth of women's cycling in the last 5 years. It's almost unrecognizable to where we are now. And I imagine that growth continues, but it's also that, that's a real strength, but it needs to be done in the right way. We've seen a lot of kind of new rules, regulations, and new races coming in every year. But it's also, sometimes we need to stop, reflect, and look where we are now and how we kind of consolidate on the growth that's already been made. And it's not just about adding more and more race days, making races longer and longer, and, kind of trying to come up to like the men's distances, men's like races. I don't think that's where we want to be with the women's side of the sport.
Welcome to Ride Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. In the podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. You are listening to a limited series of recordings during Rouleur Live 2024. This limited series has 11 episodes, and in each episode, the guests are asked 4 key questions. Each of my guests has different insights into where the opportunities for success in the cycling industry lie. So make sure you to subscribe and follow so you'll get notified of new podcasts because they will be released in quick succession. In this episode, I speak with Dani Christmas, a cycling commentator and a former sports director for Canyon SRAM Cycling's team. Dani shares her insights on the evolving landscape of women's cycling, the importance of investment in sport, and the changing dynamics of sponsorship. Now, back to the show. Welcome, Dani, to Ride Success. It's a pleasure to have you in the podcast and be part of the 24 hours with 24 leaders. This is a quick fire questions. But before we get into those, why don't you introduce yourself so people know more about you if they don't know you already?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name's Dani Christmas. I used to be a former professional rider, and since retiring from racing at the end of 2021, I've been working with Eurosport on the women's cycling coverage and have also moved into a role in sports directing as well. So been working with Canyon SRAM Racing for the last 2 years.
Brilliant. So I want to go straight into the questions and ask you, from your perspective, obviously, where should cycling companies prioritize their spending when aiming to drive visibility and engagement? Because this is an interesting question, I think, because from your perspective, you are from the racing side, and you see how brands, in terms of sponsorship, how they use professional cycling to raise their awareness.
Yeah, so I think obviously I'm a little bit biased towards the women's side of professional.
Of course, that's fine.
So that is where I would say to definitely invest the money. But I mean, really, when you look at women's sport as a whole, it's a hugely untapped market. And so brands really have the opportunity to, if they're one of those early investors, that they can come in, really make a big impact in the sport and, ultimately get a higher return on investment, which, of course, there's multiple motivations for brands to come in. But at the end of the day, the financials will speak for themselves, but also the level of engagement that you get within women's sport is massive. So it's growing every year. So I would say invest now, because if you come in 10 years time, then it's going to be more difficult.
It's too late.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously with the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, it's been a huge opportunity for brands to get involved, and really their involvement has provided a kind of a blueprint for brands that maybe are still sitting on the fence to realistically look at that example and say, like, well, there is a no-brainer. I mean, we have a hugely untapped potential here. Women's cycling generates huge amount of engagement, so we need to be investing the money there. It's a huge potential, as you rightly said. And I wanted to, from a perspective of a content creator, a lot of women riders, professional riders, have huge followers. But during the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, for instance, the engagement levels and their growth in their social media channels increase massively, and they tend to be more energetic, more enthusiastic about their own coverages of the races in comparison, for instance, with the men's. From your opinion, how has the rise of content creator economy has transformed the traditional model of sponsorship, and how are they adapting?
Yeah, I think when you look at, maybe 20 years ago, that if a brand was to sponsor a cycling team, they get the name on the jersey and maybe a ride in the team car, and that would be about it. Whereas now there's so much more demand, both on the teams, on the riders themselves. But also it makes the relationship, the partnership between the brand and the teams much more authentic, because the brand wants to invest in the team because they really believe in them, and the same way around as well. It's not just a financial transaction, so you have a much greater relationship with a brand, and both the riders and the brand become invested in that as well. So I think you see a lot more authentic content that comes from both the riders and from the team, but it's also it's really good to follow as well. And we often see that the teams and the brands put out some really well produced sort of films before major championships, and following the journeys of the riders and that as well. So there's so much content there, but it's really high quality now that we wouldn't have got 20 years ago. It just wouldn't happen. You'd watch a race on TV, and that would probably be the only time that or even if it was on TV, because it probably wasn't.
Yeah, of course.
The only time that you got to see the riders. And I think that as well, it really helps to build the fan base, because we get to see the people behind the helmet and glasses, because it really dehumanizes people when you can't see into their face. So I think that's something that, as you say, the women's peloton are really good at doing, and why we have such high fan engagement on the women's side of the sport.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, there is teams as well looking at the social media following and engagement that specific riders have, because that as well can help with the contract negotiations, because the rider can say, I can generate this much engagement, I can tell the story of your brand through my own storytelling, through my own voice, and that's a massive added bonus when, for instance, in the case of professional riding, you come to negotiate contracts.
I mean, I'd also say that, obviously you have to be able to really add value to the team on the bike, and be the right personality type as well. But of course, we look at the whole package of a person, as you would want in any team environment. And you can get an idea of what people are like on social media, and obviously we have some real characters in the women's peloton as well. So I think it's just really nice for the fans to be able to engage with the riders, and it's so much more possible to do that now on social media, to actually have a small conversation with a professional rider. It's not something that you would have been able to have done,
of course,
10, 20 years ago. So
exactly,
again, it just
kind of
keeps
democratizing is the new forms of media are helping to bridge the gap between elite athletes and people like myself that follow and are passionate about the sport. I wanted to take us to the key question, I think, is what for you, from your experience, what are the major tailwinds and headwinds for the cycling industry in the next 5 years?
I think, again, if I keep on with women's cycling, because it's where my real knowledge base is, that, as we've said, the women's side of the sport is really growing. It's snowballing. It's getting the exponential growth of women's cycling in the last 5 years. It's almost unrecognizable to where we are now. And I imagine that growth continues, but it's also that, that's a real strength, but it needs to be done in the right way. We've seen a lot of kind of new rules, regulations, and new races coming in every year. But it's also, sometimes we need to stop, reflect, and look where we are now and how we kind of consolidate on the growth that's already been made. And it's not just about adding more and more race days, making races longer and longer, and kind of trying to come up to like the men's distances, the men's like races. I don't think that's where we want to be with the women's side of the sport. So I think that the tailwinds being that, of course, we're getting more and more investment, which is brilliant, but we also need to take that with caution, that we're also investing in the development side of the sport, because a lot of the attention has been around the Women's World Tour. So that's really starting at the very highest level of the sport, where we need to make sure that we have the riders that are going to be capable of stepping up to the World Tour and coming in, at the lower level of the sport. We also need to have the investment there. And so looking at the development teams, which have been, in my opinion, one of the best developments development teams being a development in the women's side of the sport in the last years. And that's brilliant that we're getting the investment there. We also need to make sure that the staff and the support team around those riders are at the highest level as well. It's not just the riders. They need to be taken care of in the best way. And I think just in general, when it comes to racing, safety as well, it's, been a real topic in the last years, that we see more and more races on the calendar and, different rules being come in for some reasons that we don't necessarily know, safety measures that we're not too sure whether they actually do anything for safety. So we need to make sure that those areas are really taken care of.
For sure. I mean, just quickly to touch on the side of development, it's key, because I've had talks with other people that work in the cycling industry, and they identify that as a massive gap as the development stages. You can't just have people coming from junior to make that huge leap into professional racing. You need to have that from grassroots and building up a clear pathway, so that girls can look up and see, there is a clear pathway to how I can become a professional rider in the professional peloton.
Now on the women's side of the sport, being a professional rider is a legitimate career option. In the past it hadn't been. We'd have done it because for the pride and you want to be able to achieve for your own ability, but now it's financially it's something that you can look at as a legitimate career option. So if these juniors are looking at that, then there needs to be steps in place to help them get to that level and support them on their way up, because whilst there are a few incredible riders that can step straight out of juniors, it shouldn't be seen as the norm. There can be a big gulf in that area to help riders to make the smoother transition from junior through the under 23 ranks and into the elite category.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just a quick note is that one person that is, I think, in my opinion, making quite a big progression in that field is Natasha Naven with the Next Racing, and she's creating the pathway for juniors all the way to the professional ranks. So, Dani, now on a more personal side, on a personal note, what is in one thing that you do every day that enables you to perform at the best of your ability? And this is from whether professionally, personally, however you decide to answer it.
Okay. I mean, I'd love to sit here and say I get up at 5 a.m. and do yoga and do breath work and drink loads of water and stuff like that, but that doesn't happen anymore. But I definitely take...
It did already. It did in the bit.
Well, no, maybe not 5 a.m. yoga. No, that didn't happen.
Okay.
But I do take my athlete mentality that I want, when I do something, I want it to be the best of my ability. But it doesn't mean that you have to be at your best every day. And I think that's something that, I always talk to the riders about, is like, we don't want you to be, you can't be at your best in every race. You need to be able to peak and recover. But when I look at, so obviously every person has many different identities. When I look at my cycling identities as a sports director and as a commentator, I look at, where do I need to be at my best? It's race days. And so how do I be at my best at a race day? I need to spend the rest of the time is preparation. It's meticulous preparation. It's putting in the hard work so that when I stand there, in front of the riders in a team meeting, I know I've done everything I possibly can to help them to achieve the goals of the team on any given day.
Yeah.
When I'm sat in the commentary booth, I can put the headphones on and know that I've prepared in the best possible way to be able to tell the stories that are likely to unfold in the races. I've done the preparation of looking at the parkour, at the riders, their backstories, and being able to share this amazing sport with all of the viewers as well. So for me, it's about trying to get the best out of every day, but it doesn't mean that you have to be at your best every day.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, that's great. Gives a real insight into like that athlete mindset of selecting the A, the B, the C events and like really working towards those goals in the season. And then you apply that mindset to projects at work. In your case, this is that you're going to be at the director's seat. It's so interesting. I wanted to kind of wrap up. There's a tradition that I started on the podcast where every guest leaves a question to my next guest. And the question that was left for you, I need to actually look up through my notes. So the question that was left for you is the following. What is your go-to cafe order when you're going out cycling?
So when I was a rider, I didn't really do cafe stops so much. Only if we were on training camp and it was a recovery day. But yeah, if I do get the chance to go to a cafe now, then I would order a flat white and some kind of attractive looking cake. Probably a carrot cake or something like that. You probably get a good carrot cake most places that you go to.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Brilliant. So with that, what question would you like to leave to my next guest?
Okay. So I am going to ask them fantasy ride. So you can pick 3 people, dead or alive, to join you on a particular route. What's the route and who will join you and why?
Wow, that's a brilliant question. That's a brilliant question.
It's a party question, isn't it? Who are your ideal guests? Who's going to come with you on a ride? I would be interested.
Yeah, it's a real conversation starter, that one. Brilliant. Dani, it's been a pleasure to have you and chat with you about your insights into the industry and your ambitions.
Yeah, thanks.
So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this quick interview. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopez. You can find me under my own name on LinkedIn. You can find Ride to Success on all socials. And let me know if you like this format of shorter, snappier interviews with guests within the cycling industry. And if you like the show, please give us a review, follow, helps us to create better content and bring more guests to the podcast. Make sure you tune in to the next episode, which will be released shortly. Thank you for listening.